Welcome to Let's Relieve Regret, the uplifting podcast where we talk about how to relieve what you're worrying about.
It can feel so good to finally let go. Let go of past hurts, let go of old grudges, let go of self-doubt, self-shame.
The thing is, we aren't always given the tools to let go. We're told to get over it, or it's time to move on. But how do we do that?
We will share our stories, tools, and strategies of how we let go to help you let go.
Let's begin.
Hey there, listener. Welcome to the Let's Relieve Regret podcast. My name is Shadow Ball, and I'm joined today by my co-host,
Victoria Mirabercia.
And we're so lucky to have a guest with us today. Our guest today is Danielle Sebastian. Say hi, Danielle.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here.
We're so glad to have you. Have such a dynamic, interesting story to share with us today. Danielle Sebastian is an expert on identifying and overcoming trauma in relationships. She is the best-selling author of Resilient Wives, a guide for wives supporting their husband through childhood trauma recovery, and has helped hundreds navigate and repair their relationships as they support their partners through trauma recovery. After 9 years of strain in her own marriage and through years of extensive research and development on trauma, relationships, and self-care, Danielle created a signature care framework. She is a sought-after speaker, and her thought leadership has been presented to audiences of over 2,000. Happily married now for 14 years and the mother of 2, Danielle has dedicated her life to helping partners reconnect and healing together. But most of all, her passion lies in helping partners prioritize their wellness and finding community as they work towards a healthier relationship. Welcome, Danielle.
Oh, thank you so much.
Really excited about this conversation. I think it's really awesome.
Yeah.
So very raw.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's what we do here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with our check-ins. Victoria, how are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10 today?
I'm a 9.
Whoa. Sorry, I didn't need to have such a strong reaction.
Wow, wee. I know.
Do you want to explain why you're a 9 or just kind of put it out there?
Because I just went for my walk, my daily walk. And all of our regular listeners know this. Everybody knows how much I struggle with seasonal affective disorder. And it just set in, I would say, 2 days ago.
Okay.
And I had to have 2 naps yesterday, and I didn't go for a walk yesterday. And so, I made myself go for that walk today. I feel a lot better. And the colors and the trees here are amazing. And I walked by the water. So, I needed that nature therapy, and I needed that reminder to keep doing my walk every day. It's important for me. So, if you'd asked me before my walk, I probably would have said 7, but I literally just got home from my walk. So I'm a 9.
That's wonderful. Danielle, how about you on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say I'm probably a 7. I had a really busy and hectic morning. So I was a little bit lower than that, but now that I'm here with you all, I would say I'm a 7, and it's Friday,
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. So that brings me up as well.
Yeah, same. I'm also about a 7. It's one of those days where it's like I don't have anything to complain about, but I also don't have any I'm so excited about anything. I mean, I'm excited that you're here and we're recording this podcast, but outside of that. So I think I'd give myself a 7 today as well. And moving into our causes for applauses. Yay. Victoria, do you want to go first with your cause for applause?
Sure. This one might be kind of weird.
Okay.
What else is new?
Lay it on us.
I was really worried about Olivia the cat. I talk about Olivia the cat on the podcast a lot.
Yeah.
And I was really worried about her. She was peeing a lot. I know it's a sign of diabetes.
Right.
So I went, and she's been really picky about food and really vocal lately. But I went in and talked to the pet store, and I went and talked to the vet, and we switched her food. And she's basically gone keto, everybody.
Interesting.
Olivia's basically on a keto diet. She's
okay.
only eating protein. And, cats are carnivores. Dogs are omnivores. They can have, and they make cat food the same. So there's cat foods that have like lentils and corn and rice and stuff in it. And I didn't realize that the dry food I'd been giving her had that stuff in it. So I've switched her to a 100% carnivore diet, and she's already feeling better. She's not complaining as much and stuff. So that's my cause for applause, is that I'm a good pet parent.
Yeah. That's so sweet. Can I tell you that when
feeling better.
Can I tell you that when I bring Gertie to the pet store, any pet store, she goes right for the cat food. Like,
oh, how weird.
I know. Like, and at the vet too, like, is she like, even though she's scared at the vet, she'll literally come out of hiding and sniff all the different foods and then stop in front of the senior cat food and like look at me and look at the food and look at me again. And I'm like, I'm not buying you senior cat
Gertie's
food.
a dog, Danielle.
Gertie's a dog.
By the way.
She's yeah.
Gertie's a dog.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like the funniest things. I think I'm always thinking like, what is, and it's specifically the senior cat food. It doesn't matter what pet store we go to in Toronto when we're visiting family. If we have to go to a pet store, she just pulls me to the senior cat food and sits there.
That's so weird. I wonder if the senior cat food has more protein in it than the other stuff.
Maybe.
So
it's just, it's adorable.
Yeah.
Because you would assume it's more lean.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
For those seniors.
Or maybe there's more carbs in the senior one, and
maybe.
And anyways, it's just so funny. I've been having these conversations with my husband, with the pet store, and with the vet, and I'm just like, it's just hilarious. I'm like, oh, okay, so basically, I'm making her go keto. Okay,
yeah.
It's like no carbs for you, Olivia. They get addicted to the gravy because apparently the gravy is full of sugar.
Interesting.
So I've been. Yeah, like that. She will just like lick the gravy off of the food and not eat the food. And so they're like, is she doing this? Is she doing this? And I'm like, yes. Okay, got it. Stop doing that. Here's your PSA, everybody, how to feed your cat. But anyways, that's my cause for applause.
I love it. I'm gonna jump in with mine because my cause for applause this week is something a little bit heavier than usual. But I've been really obsessed with this idea around ask culture versus guess culture.
Can you explain that more?
Yeah, I will. But I didn't realize I was a guesser until recently, because I ask lots of questions. I'm always asking questions. Like, that's kind of my default state. But I don't ask for help. And this is where the ask versus guess culture really comes to a head. So there was one of these polls out there where someone was saying, my friend is coming to visit for the weekend. I can't host her this weekend, but she's asked and I don't feel comfortable saying no. Does anyone have an excuse for me that I can like give my friend? And the comments were really split 50-50 among people saying, just tell your friend no. And other people saying, well, why don't you come up with an idea like you have recently fostered ferrets and you need the spare room for your ferrets?
Oh my gosh.
Like, but
really?
See, it's
That's
really
ridiculous.
Interesting because to me, the ferret idea was golden. I was like, yes, I would absolutely do this. I would never tell someone if they directly ask me, hey, can I stay at your place this weekend? Yes, my answer would automatically be yes. And it's because as a guesser, because I fall under the guess culture people, I only ask for something when I know the answer is yes. I do all kinds of pre-work. I read people's minds and all this other kind of stuff so that when I come forward with a direct, hey, can I have this thing? I don't have to feel the rejection of them saying no. Where people who are regular askers have accepted that the answer could be yes or no. So,
like, does a guesser only ask when they guess that the answer is going to be yes? Is that what it means?
That's exactly
by
it.
Guesser?
Yes. So okay. A guesser, so it's totally fine when askers and askers are friends and when guessers and guessers are friends. The only problem is when like an asker and a guesser become friends because we don't really understand these communication differences as a culture. And it seeds resentment both ways, which is really interesting.
I can kind of identify with what you're saying in some of my friendships, actually. That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So my cause for applause is that I've been like digging deeper and like really evaluating like different friendships I have and even my relationship with my husband and like how I wasn't recognizing how often I was being one of these guesser culture people. And it's easy enough to break. It just takes practice and stuff like that. But I can see so many times where like when my husband and I have been in conflict, it's because I've done all this extra work so that when I come to him with an idea, I'm already expecting the idea to be yes. So if he says no, I completely shut down because I did all the pre-work in my head. So it's like
And in terms of pre-work, is that like you've done all the work for the reasons why you should do it, why he should say yes? Like it's like
yes,
energy inside your head, you mean? Okay.
totally. Yeah. So my cause for applause is just I like I've really learned a lot more about this, and I was talking to my husband about this too, and how like I have a friend from way back where we had a pretty big falling out, and I can now identify as that she was an asker and I was a guesser, and I like that was definitely a key source of conflict between the two of us. Yeah, so it's just like one of these fascinating things. So my cause for applause is just like learning the different ways people communicate with each other and how that's a constantly evolving thing. Like there's no end to learning how to communicate
No,
with
it's
people.
knowledge of knowledge. Like you just
Yeah,
keep learning new things to figure out
yeah,
how to interact and connect.
yeah, for sure. And
So
then
this
I
is an
had
aha moment for you.
Yeah, I had to laugh at myself yesterday night because Ben and I were heading to bed, and I like looked at him and I was like, "Oh, you're gonna take Gertie out in the morning, right?" And I started laughing. He was like, "What?" I'm like, "I'm only asking because I know the answer is yes." Like if I thought it was my turn to take her out, I wouldn't have even asked him. I would have just taken her out. But because like so it was just like again, just being like learning more ways to be aware and just kind of having fun with that kind of thing. Um,
That's a
so
really
yes,
cool cause for applause, Shadow.
thank
It's like
you.
you feeling empowered. Like you feel like it's a cause for
Yeah.
applause because you're like feeling empowered that you've learned this new
Like ask
knowledge or
culture versus
language and
guest
it's
culture.
going to
Yeah.
contribute to your emotional health and your social health and
Hmm.
all these kinds of things. And that's really interesting. I've never heard those two terms of flash, but I look at it like this person's so good at asking for what they need, but sometimes I'm just like, it's too many asks.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's because like I think like you're set like me, like we only ask when we know that that person's plate has the space. Like
Mm-hmm.
and this is something like even like way back when I was picking my bridesmaids, like my therapist was like, well, just ask people. And I was like, well, no, I have to make sure that I ask the people who have the time. And he was like, no, it's the responsibility of adults in your life to tell you no if they don't have the time.
Right.
And I
Right.
said, no, 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 no. Because if someone asks me, I'm going to say yes, even if my plate is over full. So what are you even talking about? You know? And that was way like 8 years ago now. So it's just funny that like, again, now that I've learned this concept, even though it's been like trickling in for a while now that I have such concrete terms of like, this is what ask culture looks like and this is what guesser culture looks like, it's just again fascinating, and I love learning about this kind of stuff. So that's my cause for applause this week. But I want to make sure Danielle gets a chance to tell us what's going good out there in Montana.
Wow, I don't know how to follow that one.
I
That
know.
was so
You can
good.
follow it with I got out of bed. Like we celebrate all causes of applause here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I really liked that. I really liked that analogy. Let's see. I will say, okay, so I am pretty good at prevention. So, I do all the things that would prevent illness. So I'm very good at doing vaccines. I'm very good at getting colonoscopy when I am told to do so.
Yeah.
um,
Fun.
all those fun things, bone density, to prevent whatever. And so I went to the dermatologist this week and we saw some weird stuff. And I've had previous, the basal cells or whatever
Yeah.
that are precancerous that I've had scraped out of my face. And so we went in and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this because I think I see something weird. And they went in and biopsied, but I heard this week that there was nothing there. So,
Yay. That's a great cause for
Oh,
applause.
yeah, don't you think?
I
Right?
think that's
yeah.
awesome cause for applause.
Okay. Yeah.
Yay.
So I feel good about that. I'm proud of myself for going in, even though it's scary, to do that. But and then I'm also happy that it's nothing.
Yeah.
It's got to be a
It's
relief. Sorry,
So
I didn't mean
scary
to
to
cut
do
you in.
those things. No, that's okay. I was just gonna say it's so scary to do those things, right? Because you don't want to know the answer,
Mhm.
but we have to do these things.
You have to.
You have to
Mhm.
get
You
the
have to.
mammogram, you have to get the colonoscopy,
You do.
you have
gotta-
to check the moles on your body.
Yep. All the
Mhm.
things. So let this be your reminder, everyone's
Yeah.
reminder out there.
Mhm.
Do
Gotta
the
do it.
things. Yeah,
Gotta
you
do
have
it.
to get the pap smear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how
All
many?
the
There's a
things.
huge long list.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's a great cause for
Absolutely.
pause. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Great. So I think we get right into it. Victoria, before you share your regret today, do you have any like pre-story or background you want to share?
Yeah,
Okay.
I wasn't gonna share this one today. I was gonna share a different one. As I was going on my walk and I was thinking about the last episode that we recorded, and in our last episode, you can go back and listen to it, listeners. In our last episode, we were talking about mother-daughter relationships
Mm-hmm.
and the expectations of mothers of daughters and daughters of mothers, and how those expectations should change, but sometimes they don't change.
Okay.
That's what I'll say. So
Yeah. Okay. Take it away.
I have something that I would like to let go of in order to move forward. And that is, and this might sound weird, it's my relationship with my mom, but it's not my relationship with my mom that I'm letting go of. It's that, I realized I'm 43 now, and my mom and I had like pretty tumultuous relationship in my teenage years. I'm a middle child, and I do feel like that I was forgotten a lot. and, and my mom was a working mom with 3 kids. And my dad owned his own business. So there was a lot going on. But I think I held resentment for a really long time in my 20s and even my 30s. And this kind of behavior still comes up for me. Not behavior, these feelings. Or you could call it little T trauma, or you could call it big T trauma even. But these feelings come up for me. And I realized that I need to see my mom as a human being more than just the person that I want approval from and the person that I expect to be perfect for me. And I think my mom needs to do that for me too. But right. So the discussion that we were having in our last episode was about that, was about, the expectations that daughters have on mothers. Like all we really want is for our mom to love us unconditionally, like deep down inside, right? And I think all mothers want is that as well. And my mom struggles because my sister lives in Australia, and then I have a younger brother. So like I'm the daughter, like I'm the daughter in Canada, right? And I struggle because I think that she thinks that my sister is her favorite, which I don't think is the case. So I need to, like, the consequence of holding on to these things and not like working on my relationship with my mom. And I'll be open, like my mom and I have been working on our relationship for the past 10 years, ever since I had my total Danielle, I don't know if you know, but I had a total nervous breakdown 10 years ago, so much so that like I was paralyzed for 8 hours. And I really changed a lot. I'm a completely different person now than I was 10 years ago. I've learned a lot about myself. I've healed myself. And part of that has been working on my relationship with my mom. But I think I just have to let go of a couple more little things. And that the last time we recorded an episode, it kind of like opened that eye for me. So yeah, the consequence of holding on to that is, my mom's getting older, and I need to nurture that relationship and practice letting go with it, and acknowledge her for who she is now and not who she was 20 years ago, because I want her to acknowledge me for who I am now and not who I was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. So in my teenage years and in my 20s and in my 30s, that's who I was then, but I'm a different person now. And I was treating my mom with the tools and the knowledge that I had then, and that's okay. But I'm going to move forward. And that's my regret.
Thank you, Victoria. Do you want feedback today, or did you just kind of want to share that and get it out there?
Yeah, I want feedback, but I do feel cringy about it because I still
Okay.
feel shame about it. But give me the feedback.
That's a really helpful thing to add here. Now, we all know that rational thoughts are not the same as how we feel.
Yeah.
So I guess I just wanted to kind of evaluate a little bit more the idea that like your sister's the favorite. Like, do you
Okay.
think that's real, or do you think that's just like a physical response becoming thought?
I think I don't know how to answer the
That's
question.
okay. No, that's okay. It could be too, yeah, it could be
Like, I
too
think it could
much.
be both things. No, it's not too much. I like it's something I think about a lot, but I think I definitely have like super bad middle child syndrome, right? Like I
Sure.
definitely all like so these are like the beliefs, like the patterns that my brain has programmed for me,
Mm,
right? Like I can
hmm.
acknowledge that rationally, like what you're
Yeah.
saying. I can totally acknowledge that rationally or acknowledge things that happened in my teenage years or my childhood years where
Hmm.
these like belief patterns came from.
Yeah.
And then I mean I can also acknowledge that like it's I'm not a parent, so Danielle,
Sure.
maybe you can, or maybe you don't want to comment on this, but like I don't think parents have favorites, but I think they might have better relationships with some child over
Sure.
another one. And I think my mom has a better relationship with my sister.
Interesting.
But
Okay.
I also think it's because she lives on the other side of the planet.
I was going to say distance really makes us closer sometimes. I know that sounds really silly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think there is something to that. But yeah, I just want to share something with you that happened literally on Sunday. I was talking to my mom, and my mom's going through like a whole I don't want to call it a rebrand because that's she doesn't do that
It's
kind
like
of
a
stuff.
rebrand.
But
She's growing.
she's growing and it's incredible and it's like everything I really wanted like 20 years ago. And I'm so happy that she's going through it now. But then there's like part of me that's like still unhealed, that's like mad that she's going
Yeah.
through it because she's showing the capacity for growth. But I think the reason she's showing capacity for growth is that I'm removed, is that she's having time to herself and really learning things and like going out there. So we were talking about something that happened in the family, and she brought up the concept of blame and how like in the last year she has finally discovered that blame is useless. And it like broke my little 12-year-old heart because
Yeah.
like that was a constant conversation as a kid. Like I was always trying to evade blame or put it on my brother. Like there was like the idea that like something was wrong and someone has to step up and take ownership of that blame was a constant theme in my household growing up. So to hear her say this now, it's like something I've wanted to hear for so long, and it's still like again it's such a complicated feeling because I'm
Yeah.
so happy for her to finally like really take that lesson on and like really move forward with that. But part of me still is desperate to like go back in time and like relive my childhood with her having that lesson 25 years ago.
Yeah. Like what your
um
inner child's like, why couldn't you have been this way for me back then?
Totally. And that's
Yeah.
not fair to her. Like, and that also like
Yeah.
cheapens our relationship that I'm like so desperate to be like, oh, mom, as if you're only figuring this out now. But like, I just gave her time to like express it and talk it through it. And so yeah, so that's why I was asking about like, is it like a rational thing or is it like a kid thing that like you still get this like physiological response in your body,
Oh,
even though
yeah.
rationally, I was so proud. I was so proud to hear her say those words, but physically inside, I was angry. And
Yeah.
it's
Like I
taken
for
me my own
sure.
time to like journal it out. And now talking to
Yeah.
you guys about it too, I can feel how silly it was to feel that way. Yeah, that's why I asked that question.
I for sure revert back to like 16-year-old Victoria whenever I visit my parents. And my husband's
Right.
usually like, stop it. Like, don't let your mom push your buttons. She's just being a human being. And I'm like,
Right,
why would you do
right.
that? Right. Like
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
like
yeah.
I revert back sometimes to being like hard on her. And I think she reverts back to being hard on me sometimes too. Right. But
Totally.
I know that we're both working on it. So
Yeah.
just yeah. So to answer your question, yes.
Yes. Okay, I love it.
To answer your question, yes, both things. Yeah,
Great.
both things.
Okay. Danielle, I want you to have a chance to provide some feedback here for Victoria. So why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you did say, you have kids and do you have favorites? And I think it's interesting because my sister and I'm not talking about my parent experience as a mom right now, but as a as a
daughter.
sibling.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were so different. I mean, night and day, different people. And I, she felt like I was the favorite. But I
Right.
feel like they're closer now. And I just think it's different, right? She was harder to parent. I was a little bit easier for them to parent, and so we just have different types of relationships. But I think, they are a little bit closer now because of all of the stuff they had to get through and deal with, and they made it through. So I feel like they're just they're closer now, than I am to my mom. And I just think it's different. And I think there's different stages to it as well, because I'll probably be the one that ends up, kind of being the one that nurtures and
Yeah.
takes on that role later, and then that might change. So
True.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've had this conversation with my siblings too. And I've had to say to them to kind of get them to realize like your experience was different from my experience. Like, even though we grew up in the same house, like your relationship with mom and dad is not the same as my relationship with mom and dad. And like, that's kind of what you're saying is like, even though we grew up in the same atmosphere, we still had individual relationships that are different, and we are different people. And so you can be having a shared experience and a different experience at the exact same time. You can feel more than one thing at the same time, but you can also be having a shared experience. You have your shared experience and then you have your individual experience, and they're both happening at the same time.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Because I feel like my parents were harder on me in general because I was pretty self-sufficient. Yeah. Whereas my sister, they would go over and above, and I'm like, what? If I would ask for that.
Yeah, I was the self-sufficient one as well.
Go get a job. Whereas, I saw the opposite happening with my sister. Totally different experiences.
Yeah. Which is also like an interesting thing. Again, I'm not a parent. It's an interesting thing about the idea of like equality versus equity with your kids. Like each kid is a different personality and has different needs. And so you give them what they need. They might view it as not being equal, but we're looking for equitable division of the attention or whatever it is. Or maybe there's more attention here or there, but it's because that's what that kid needs more.
As a parent, I've been I knew it as a kid. I mean, my parents went above and beyond for not equity, but things being equal.
Right.
They went above and, but like they spent the exact same dollar amount at Christmas on each of us. That has continued. Valentine's Day, we would get the exact same gift. So they went, in my opinion, overboard on the being equal piece.
And how did that feel?
Sometimes you want a little individuality. Like I didn't want to wear the same outfit as Valentine's Day as I got older, But I think they focus more on things being equal than equity, as you're mentioning.
And I think my parents focused the other way. And I mean, there's got to be a balance between equity and equality. There's got to be a balance, and like my little 12-year-old inner child like interpreted that as like less love for me, I think, but that's not what was going on. Right. And so I would definitely
say that my kids are paying very, very close attention to things being equal.
How old are your kids?
They do. So now they're 12 and 16.
Right.
But all growing up, it was like she got more. I mean, you wouldn't even think about it. And they're like, she got one more gift than I did for Christmas. And it is tied to their feelings of being loved the same.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's where I came from too. Like when I was working through some of these things, because again, when you have a total mental breakdown, physical breakdown, no matter if it was caused by work or whatever, it's your whole life. Right. And so you start like processing your whole life as you're healing yourself and you're rising up from this complete rock bottom place. And there were thoughts in my head that was like, why don't they love me as much? Right. Which was part of my healing process. Right. And it has nothing to do with the love. It had to do with like what they were capable of giving and what they perceived each child's needs and wants were, and what support each child needed. Right. And I mean, I was also like self-sufficient, but also very closed off as a teenager. Like I didn't tell my parents anything. They had to guess. They had to guess. And maybe that's how I became a little bit of an asker shadow. I would ask, but then they wouldn't know why I was asking for things because I wasn't giving them all the information or whatever.
Right.
So it's these like behavior patterns. And it's really interesting to me to think about it rationally in terms of, we've talked about this on the podcast before. You always revert back to your habits that you kind of developed between the age of like 10 and 19, because that's when the brain has the most myelination. So it's actually cementing in those neurological pathways that you're making. And yeah, like I revert back to 16-year-old Victoria whenever I go home, and I'm trying to learn to not be 16-year-old Victoria whenever I go back to Peterborough to visit my parents or whatever it is. Right. Yeah. I think the more you talk about it and the more you talk about it rationally, to your point, Shadow, is like, is it rational or is it not? The more you're able to kind of take control of those thought patterns and change them. So it's kind of a big deal for me to say this out loud, because I do feel that, because everybody wants, especially when you're kind of a public figure, and we are public figures, right? We have the podcast, I do speaking things, and I don't say you want to put off this persona, because I don't. I want to be who I really am. But sometimes you feel that pressure to be like, I have a great family life and I have a great this and everything's perfect and I'm a motivational speaker and you should be like me, right? But that's not real. And I'm not saying I don't have a great family life, everybody. My parents are wonderful people. It's just that it's not perfect. And there's things that we can work on, and there's things that I can work on from my role as a daughter versus the perspective of putting it all on my mom and saying, no, it's your responsibility as the role of the mother. And especially in an adult relationship.
Yeah.
Right. At some point, your relationship shifts with your parents where it becomes an adult relationship. I mean, they're always going to think they're your parent. And they're always going to see you as, a kid, but it shifts. Like you can start to have real conversations with them. You can start to share things. You can, right. There is a shift. And so your expectations need to shift on that too, from yourself and from them. And yeah, I mean, we could go down a whole like rabbit hole here, but I'm just only speaking from my perspective, because I also want to say this, is that like I have parents that are working on their self-awareness, and we're working on it. And kind of what you said too, Shadow, your mom like had this discussion about blame, but like also recognizes that some of you listening out there have parents that might never have the capacity to do that. So how do you just like forgive yourself and manage your expectations so that you can have what a healthy relationship looks like for you too. Right. So I'm only like speaking about my experience here. Yeah.
No, that's incredible. And I'm so glad you brought it back to that, because something that was like blaring off in my head as you were talking about this, the collective experience and different experiences and stuff. Remember how do we all remember the viral dress? Is it black and blue, or is it white and gold?
White and gold, or blue and
black dress.
Black or something. Yeah. The striped dress.
The striped dress. And everyone was like, some people were saying it was one color, other people were saying it was the other color. And people were just convinced that the people who could see the other color were lying, or who could only and then I was on the white and gold team for a long time. And then I was walking by someone's computer, because I was still working in the office at that point. And there was just something about the way it was on the computer. I was like, oh, you got the blue and black version.
Oh, interesting.
I was like, you have the different I thought there was two different versions, because I was convinced that anyone who said they saw the blue and black one was lying. And it was all like a big joke and blah, 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 because people really took it to like really, and it was such a small little example. It was such a small little example that we're all having this collective shared experience. We have different perspectives, and we're trying to convince the other person of our perspective, even though what they're seeing right in their face is different. And so everyone was like, oh, I don't get the big deal about this dress and blah, blah, blah. But to me, it just really exemplified this exact thing, that like we all have a collective experience, but we can go through the same thing and have different outcomes. And it's so small, but it's also everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like our brain reverts to like assumption. Like I'm assuming you're having the same experience as me, or I assume that you have the same perspective as me. How could you not have the same perspective as me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then we fill it in, right? Like again, I remember people saying, "You're lying." When I said I could see the white and gold, and I said to them, "You're lying." And like neither of us were lying. It's just it
So
was
if
the
it's
way.
something like a dress, think about what that does to the world, or think about what that does in family
Exactly.
dynamics. Like we can
Exactly.
remember things differently. Like we can remember the same family trip and remember it differently,
Absolutely.
or remember whatever it is, right? And that's I don't know what that is. That is like that is like a lesson, right? Like it's like
Yeah,
a life lesson. It's
compassion.
like
Yeah, compassion
compassion,
for us,
empathy, all
compassion
those
for
things.
others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Danielle, do you have any other questions for Victoria about her share or any other pieces of feedback out of the discussion that we've had so far?
The only thing I would say is that I see this a lot with childhood trauma survivors in my work.
Okay.
So I deal with the partners, and for the most part, the partners haven't had their own trauma. But the trauma relationships with parents of childhood trauma survivors is very complicated. Very complicated. And so the partners are always, they want everything to be fine and push the relationship. But won't you regret, not hanging out with them on, being with them on Christmas, that, if they pass away. But trauma survivors often have to set some serious boundaries with their families just because of all the deep, complex feelings. And I think in a lot of cases, the reason that the trauma occurred, was due to some dynamics that just will probably never get fixed. To your point.
It's not all going to be perfect. And there's this big kind of
No.
societal push to be like, my family's great. Everything's great.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to present myself.
Get over it. Get
or
over
get
it
over
or
it. Get
whatever.
over yourself with these things.
Yeah.
And to realize things are
sometimes,
complex.
Yeah. Just what, if you can spend 2 hours of good time, with your family members, that's enough. Right.
Yeah.
That's enough. It doesn't, don't worry about what everybody else's relationship looks like and how much time they spend, with their family. It should be a healthy one for both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
like
helpful.
Such an excellent point. And we need to hear that more and more, right? Because we put our expectations on our partners, families, and societal expectations instead of just looking at the idea of family as what's a healthy relationship, what's the family you got, what's the family you choose, what are these things that are going to make us emotionally healthy and happy. It doesn't always resolve, and this sounds so harsh and I don't mean it, but that's life. Like that's part of the human experience. It's like, how can you resolve it for yourself? And we talked about this in past episodes too, is like forgiveness is for you. Right? Like sometimes you can't forgive the person that's wronged you, whether it's a parent or whatever it is, but you can forgive yourself for being in that situation, or you can forgive yourself for the feelings that you felt about it. You can practice letting go, but you're doing it for you. And sometimes you have to recognize that the other person you're in conflict with isn't going to change. So if I'm going to move forward in a relationship with them, I have to accept them for who they are now.
And where they are.
And I have to forgive myself. And sometimes that forgiveness is I have to forgive myself for having bigger expectations, and I have to let those bigger expectations go, or I have to forgive myself for being in that situation because that's the knowledge I had then. That's who I was then. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to do these things. Right. And so, yeah, just that reminder that like forgiveness is for you, and the forgiveness that you can control within you is the healing. You can't control other people. You can only control you, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Victoria, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add before we pivot to Danielle?
No, I still feel kind of cringy about it. It's
That's
good.
okay.
But it's good. Like that was a hard one for me to put
Yeah, of
out there. So
course. Yeah, no, like, and again, thank you for being willing to share, even though it's not like all wrapped up in a bow yet. I think that's also an expectation we place on ourselves in this like journey of like the podcast of being like,
yeah.
okay, I want to share something, but I want to make sure that I've already processed it and it's not like, so I like when you bring these ones that are still worth kind of, scratching and flipping under and like looking around. And yeah,
Yeah.
I love it when you bring these ones that aren't
You too.
fully polished yet.
Yeah. They don't have to be polished, right? We can just
Yeah.
bring like our feeling and have a discussion about it. And that's part of processing and part of healing too, is just
Mm-hmm.
having a discussion with a friend or a safe person or a supportive person. And you don't come to a conclusion with the discussion, but part of the healing is speaking it, saying it out loud, and then you'll learn something through that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you,
Great.
both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. So now we would like to pivot to Danielle. Danielle, similarly, before you start, do you want to add any background information or do you just want to jump in?
I think I'm just going to jump in
Perfect.
to the regret that, when you asked me that question, I was like, oof, in my the bio that you read, that whole
Mm,
journey that I went through with my husband, there was a lot of regrets, that were made on both of our parts throughout that. But I would say that my biggest regret in that whole situation was that I did not allow myself to realize that strength is being vulnerable.
mm,
I had a perception that being strong and being strong enough to get through it meant that I had to take it all on. I had to pretend like everything was fine. I couldn't ask for help. I had to I never let anybody really in to the pain that was going on with me and my relationship. And I just want to be able to voice that because after I wrote my book and my story, I had so many people come up and say, I had no idea, including my sister.
mm,
I
mm-hmm.
had no idea that is what you were going with through. And that is, I think the old me would have been taken that as a compliment.
Right.
And new me is like, I do not take that as a compliment.
Hmm.
I did not. Those people wanted to be there for me. Those people wanted to be there for me. They could have made my life easier, and I made my life harder and more painful. And the process probably lasts too long
Mm.
because of that piece of me.
Do you want to share more, or is that kind of where you'd like to leave it for now?
I think I can leave it for now, but I'd
Okay.
love discussion
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Then my next question was going to be,
or
do you
people's
want
thoughts.
feedback or just to be heard? But I also wanted to make sure you
Yeah.
were finished. So, okay. So we will jump into some feedback, and I'm going to have Victoria take the lead here.
So are you saying that you put up a wall, right? And you didn't want people to see you as being weak because you felt you had to be the strong one for your husband because it was your husband that was going through this kind of grief or healing and you're supporting him in that?
I think it wasn't so much about what everybody thought. It was
Yeah.
that I thought I was doing the right thing
Mm-hmm.
for my
Oh, because you were
husband and
protecting him from
relationship
your
because I was protecting him. And when I realized that me, that was doing nobody any good, I wish it didn't do him any good, right?
yeah.
And it definitely didn't do anything good for me, and it didn't do anything good for the relationship.
Mm.
I think that's such sage advice in any like partnership, relationship,
Yes.
marriage, right? Is we often don't tell our partners how we're really feeling because
Yes.
we think we're protecting them, but all we're really doing is kind of alienating them or isolating them more because they can see us. they could see our body language. They can hear us when we're saying, oh yeah, everything's fine. Like they know, right? And so then they feel like they're not worthy of connection or some ways. Yeah. That's so interesting, because it's interesting that my first take was that you were doing it from like your inner critic, but you weren't. You were like consciously doing it because you thought that's what was
needed
gonna
for the situation.
help your husband heal. And so you thought that that was your way of supporting him.
Yep.
And I think it's so, I love that you said strength is being vulnerable. That's right. The healing comes from being vulnerable for both of you. And when you're in a marriage, a partnership, a relationship, like you heal together in different ways, right? He's healing from something else, but like you're helping him heal. But it also happens to you. It's like when I went through my mental breakdown, my physical and mental breakdown, I remember at one point, maybe 6 or 8 months after, and my husband wasn't feeling so great. And he was like, you know what happened to you happened to me too, Victoria.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, oh, right. Like you're the one that came home and found me paralyzed on the basement floor and I couldn't move. Like it didn't happen to you in the same way that it happened to me. But he's like, you're the person that I love the most on the face of the planet. And I had to see that. I had to see you hurting. And it's interesting too, in terms of, this is an interesting one too, is that, and this is happening more and more here in Canada, and I don't know if it is in the States or not, but there's like husband support groups or husband or dad support groups for dads that have watched a really traumatic birth.
Yes.
Because that's like very traumatic for the dad.
Yes.
And we don't consider that. It's all about the mom. But if they were in the room watching an emergency C-section happen and there's blood and whatever, like they're watching two people, a person that's coming out of their partner and their partner, like being really physically traumatized, but that's really traumatizing for them. So I actually had a friend that watched his wife have a really traumatic birth. And he was telling me he got put into this group for basically like PTSD for dads who had watched really difficult births. And we've never thought about that before, but like, yes, it's super traumatic for the mom. You have your scarring, you lost blood, but like, it's also, can you imagine watching the person that you love the most and you have no control over it? You can't help them at all. You're just standing there in the room and you have no control over it. And again, like, I didn't really know what you were going to say. This is how we run the podcast. It's like whoever's sharing doesn't know what the other person's going to say. So, but it kind of comes back to my point about like a shared experience and a different experience happening at the same time, but you have to acknowledge that you're both the parts that you're sharing. And it can actually like bring you closer, right? When you're saying, I'm hurting because I'm seeing you hurting and this is hurting me too. And so let's hurt together and let's heal together. And so in some ways, I mean, you can totally correct me if I'm wrong here. You're the expert on this.
But this point, right? The turning point of our journey really was when I was able to say, I know you're hurting and you're going, through all this, but I'm really hurting too. In different ways. And I can't do this alone anymore. I can't be the sole person, that is here for you. I need help. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
And when we were able to have that conversation and then because in a lot of cases in a trauma situation, it's kind of a secret, right? That you have
that
to
was going to be my other.
You feel you need to protect, but what we were able to do, and this is, I want people to learn from this, is that we were able to have a conversation that for me to get support, that we both felt comfortable, that did maintain the privacy of the situation. Right. It can be done. So don't just sit there and think you have to do it alone.
Yeah. Because Danielle, I think for me, I think once the wall comes down, then everything's going to come out. So like I would be so scared to seek support because I would want to be like, oh, my person's going through this tough thing and I'm struggling. And all it would take is someone to be like, okay, well, what's the tough thing? And I would just let it all out. And that would be such a betrayal to my partner. So I also think I would have followed this same path of just like, nope, we're dealing with this together behind closed doors. and that's all it's going to be for now. So I guess I have a question for you around like, I guess I just want to be careful with how I quite like word it. Like you said, your friends didn't know you were going through this. If one of your friends had asked you like point blank, like, or like which question could a friend ask if they're noticing a change in another friend that might indicate that there's something that they're struggling with behind closed doors?
Great question. I think that when I worked with my husband on, that safe space, it was like, I need a friend that I can reach out to. I don't need to tell them the gory details. I just need them to be there for me. Right. And be there to just be like, help me, take me out to dinner, take me to lunch, get a drink with me.
Yeah.
And just let me, be there and, don't have to tell the gory details. And we were able to have that conversation. It was usually one of my friends, like usually my clients and stuff have one friend that their husband would feel comfortable with that. Right.
Right.
And then there's usually a couple that they're like, absolutely not this person. Right. Because that person will tell everybody.
Yeah.
So having that
right?
conversation.
Right. So having that conversation really released that. But all I would have loved is if one of my friends had seen it and just been like, hey, it does look, you look tired. You just don't look the same. You're not having the same conversations at group dinners that you used to. Is there anything I can help with? You don't have to tell me the gory details, but I just want you to know if you ever want to walk or go for a run or get a drink, you let me know.
Yeah.
I really like this. I think this is an important lesson for all of us, that when we're seeing our friends struggle, the idea that like, you can tell me, because I think we really default to you can tell me anything. I'm your best friend. You can tell, right? But
we all kind of want to know the details.
We love it. We love gossip. We love the information. We love it.
Yeah. But how do you? May not, especially in a relationship, right? It may not be the best thing. It may not be the best thing.
So that's a really important part. I'm really curious. When I was introducing you, there was the CARE framework. Your signature CARE framework.
Is that an acronym?
It is.
Okay.
Tell us what it stands for.
Oh, I'd love to. So it really, when I looked back, I like to break things down into small pieces. And so when I got to this point where I'm like, I think we made it through. I think we can get through anything. I think we have the tools, to handle all the trauma triggers, and, no matter what comes, we're going to make it. I sat down and I was like, what did I have to do to get to this point? Like, what were those steps, and what could I teach people that would make it easier for them than the 9, 10 years that it took me? And so I broke it down. So the C is comprehend. So you really do need to understand trauma and the trauma brain and the triggers you're seeing. So comprehend. And the A, accessing the support that you need. See, number 2, that's when the real turning point happened for my relationship. And then the R is resilience building. And that's really focusing on the self-care piece. So it's kind of adding to the getting the support you need. You also need to have your own things that make you feel strong and resilient. And then the E is establishing healthier dynamics in your relationship. So only if you can get to those first 3 steps can you really make a big difference in the actual relationship communication and dynamics.
That's brilliant.
I was gonna say on my like journey in this wellness industry, like Shadow's journey, my journey, our shared journey, our individual journeys, this keeps coming up, and it's really interesting to me. Not interesting, but the stuff that I really am attracted to, or the people that we have on this podcast, or when we see these methods in, like, I would say the 80s and the 90s and even the early 2000s, we didn't do the foundational stuff. Like, a lot of the methods just went right to kind of band-aid covering things, or like if you do this, so remember like The Secret, like if you just make a vision board, everything will work out. Right. So like it's like, and I say this a lot, like Oprah got that one wrong.
Kind of. I agree.
She really
I'm like, my
that
parking lot spot did not open up.
Yeah,
remember that analogy?
I'm not living in a multi-million-dollar mansion. What happened? How come it didn't work?
Yeah.
I'm always pleasantly, because the method, when I talk about the letting go method that I do with my clients, it's reveal first, right? Which you're
Yes.
saying is like comprehend. It's like
Yeah.
understand the underlying roots first.
Yes.
And then the part that I see that's missing a lot in a lot of coaching programs or manifesting things or things that are out there, because is the letting go and the forgiveness. And it can be two different things, right? I think people misunderstand what forgiveness is, right? You have to forgive the other person, but then you still feel resentful for the other person because you forgave them, the person that wronged you or whatever it is. So it's like, it's the letting go, like understanding the foundations and then the letting go, which is essentially what you've said here too. And you're saying you can't get to that last part where you make the dynamics in your relationship what you want it to be if you don't do the work first. And I'm joyfully saying, I love seeing these kinds of processes and that women are doing this work. And I mean, men are doing this work too, but like that we're finally understanding that we have to reveal and then release, or how you're saying is comprehend.
You
And then
have to know the why.
Access is part of the letting go,
Yeah.
right? Like access is part of the sharing of the information and having all of this information about ourselves. So it might be rational information about how my brain works in my body, but it might also be like, this is how this makes me feel. And I want you to know that this is how this makes me feel. But all of the underlying work is so important. And I've been in the wellness industry for over 25 years, and I started the way most people start in the wellness industry in fitness.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Personal
Love
trainer,
it.
fitness, worked at a gym, right?
Mhm.
But the problem with that is if we start with fitness, but we don't do the other work, the fitness is the stuff that should be adjacent to the work or happen after you've done the foundational work, because we can get addicted to dopamine. We can think we're healing ourselves with fitness. We can see our body change, but it still doesn't change our inner monologue and our inner voice. And the fitness industry makes all of these promises about band-aid solutions. And so their marketing is always like, you start with your body first. You'll feel better about yourself once you have more muscle and once you've lost 30 pounds. But you won't feel better about yourself if you only lose the 30 pounds and you don't actually do that foundational work on yourself, right? It makes me very happy to hear more and more people creating these methods or saying these things that are really teaching people how to do the work. And, you find a coach that works for you. I'm not for everyone. Maybe you're not for everyone, but you find the people that work for you, or maybe you are for everyone and maybe I am but you find the one that works for you. It really matters. So I guess I want to thank you or appreciate you or validate you or all of those things that like that C, that A, and that R are incredibly important.
Oh, I mean,
important.
and these poor women, I mean, and me, going through it, they are so exhausted. You can look at their faces and they are just maxed out, hopeless, isolated, lonely, and it's like, you got to fix that first, man.
Yeah, you won't get out of that
get
place of overwhelm unless you look at the roots or the foundations. Or
you can have I can give them as many communication ideas as possible, but if you are at your wit's end, you're going to be more reactive to the triggers than you want to be, right? Until you can get that piece done, and it just won't work. It just doesn't work as well. So totally agree. I learned it the hard way.
I'm just like having a little aha moment too. Is that like maybe I wasn't ready to not be reactive with my mom because I hadn't done the work yet. So thanks.
Incredible.
Full circle. Full circle.
Yeah.
Full circle. But yeah. And I think the work that you do is so interesting and important and valid, is exactly what you said your regret was. I think there's so many people out there. I use the people pleasing cycle a lot as an example, but it's just kind of one of the patterns we slip into, and we mistake the people pleasing, or we mistake the being of service as helping, but we get too much into the being of service and we neglect ourselves. Right. So when we talk about, we've talked about this on the podcast before, we talk about the 6 emotional needs that we need to meet, right? Certainty, diversity and variety, growth and challenge, significance, which is different from love, and then being of service. For many of us, we put all of our emotional attention into being of service, and we neglect that What am I sure of? What's the diversity and variety that I have in my life? What challenges me to grow as a person? What makes me feel significant and important? Who makes me feel loved? We neglect those 5 pieces of emotional health because we think that being of service is the most important one. Or maybe society's told us that. I don't know where it comes from, but it's very common. And that is actually hurting us. It's actually hurting ourselves to not pay attention to the rest of our emotional needs for our own emotional health. And like, just thank you for saying, like, my regret is thinking strength is being vulnerable, but it's not, because setting those really high walls and boundaries is actually like harming the rest of your emotional needs and your emotional health. And when you do that, you're also harming the emotional health of your relationships.
Yeah. It was 100% not serving the relationship either.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you convinced yourself that it was.
I was absolutely, I mean, and most of the clients I'm with are absolutely convinced that that's the right path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that you're coming at it from like a husband, wife, or partnership, but like that could also be the same
Any
in our
relationship.
relationship with our parents,
Yep.
with our siblings, with our boss.
Coworker,
right?
absolutely.
Like toxic workplace environments, right? Like we are convinced that our worth is being of service, and we're convinced that it doesn't help the other person in the relationship we're in to show them our weakness. And I'm using air quotes here, everybody. I know you can't see me, it's a podcast, but we can't show them our weakness. That's not helpful.
Yep.
But it's actually one of the most helpful things you can do, because you develop empathy and compassion for each other. And then you realize that each other we're just human beings having a real human experience here. And it's imperfect. There's no such thing as a perfect human, right? Vulnerability is, important, and being honest is important.
Danielle, I can imagine that when you bring on a new client, something they might say a lot is like, oh, I just feel so selfish doing this. Like I'm supposed to be there. Like how would you help someone break through? Because there is the vulnerability piece, but there's also the idea of, I don't want to be selfish. Like, is that something that comes up with your clients? Or maybe that's just my knee-jerk reaction here.
Yeah. Like if I tell them how I feel, then I'm being selfish because I'm not giving 100% of my attention to them. Is that kind of what you're saying, Shadow?
Kind of. Yeah.
I do get that a lot. They, a lot, I mean, they've spent a lot on resources to help, right? Their partner, they feel guilty for taking some of those resources and spending it on themselves. I'm using air quotes, don't go on a podcast, sorry. But, using it on themselves. I do get a lot that feels so, they feel like it's like they're spending money on a spa, like extravagant, like it's an extravagant thing.
Indulgent, extravagant. Yeah.
I'm indulgent. And oh my goodness. But in a lot of cases, my people are coming to me and they're like, I need to be more selfish. I can't handle this anymore. So I kind of see both sides. And neither one is healthy, right?
Right.
Neither one is it's the approach that, that we work through with the program. So I will tell you, a lot of women, they're just like, they've been successful in their careers, right? They're really excellent moms, and they're feeling like, why can I not figure this part out? Why can I not figure this out? I feel stupid. This should be easy. Why is it not? And I just want anybody who's out there.
And I don't need help.
I shouldn't need help. It's a lot more guilt. Like I shouldn't reach out. I'm reading all the books. Why are they not working? And I just want you to know that you can do that for 10 years and never get anywhere. Just give it a whirl, right? If that is you, don't sit there and struggle if you think there's something else that can help you.
Yeah, don't keep banging your head against the wall. Or
just let your feelings about it go, your shame about it go. A relationship with a trauma survivor is different. It's different.
In what ways? Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, I would love to.
In which ways is a relationship with a childhood trauma survivor different than, I guess, I don't want to say a typical relationship, because what relationship is typical, but Like, what
Yeah.
considerations should we consider if we find out our partner is someone who experienced trauma as a child?
The best way I like to describe it is that the coping mechanisms that a child developed, their brain literally changed because of the stress and the fear and the unpredictability of their situation, so that they now are looking hyper alert to danger, right?
Right.
And
Okay.
they develop coping mechanisms because of that shift that end up not serving well in adult relationships. Be needing to control to feel safe. That's pretty tough in a relationship as a partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To feel
sure.
controlled when it's
For
not
sure.
enough, doesn't have anything to do with you. It's their need. So it makes them feel safe. It doesn't really actually have anything to do with you. But if you don't know that as a spouse, you think they're trying to control you. What a controlling jerk.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Right.
That's just one good example. The other is trust, right? I mean, these people are
Yeah.
going to be very distrustful. And you think that once you get married to this person, that's a given, right? They trust me.
Yeah, that'll go away once we're married.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases it doesn't. And actually, a lot of the behaviors that they have, you take very personally, right? They don't trust me. Whereas if you could acknowledge that, hey, I think this has a lot to do with your past, but I want to make you feel safe. You know, if you want to check my cell phone, that's great. But just realize that that's happening so that we can deal with it in a healthier way. And then just the way that they respond, because they're always hyper alert to danger. They see danger even when it isn't there. And so simple things that happen and occur in relationships, like, hey, can you help me with the dishes tonight? They take it as a personal affront to their character, to who they are as a person, that they're a terrible father and husband, and they lash out.
Got it.
And so that's really difficult for the spouse to understand. And that's where I'm talking about that it seems like people are beating their head around the same fights, not knowing how to get past it. And that's one that I can really help with, right away, is identifying those.
I think that's a really important thing to look for.
Yep.
And to acknowledge what you need help is if we're having the same fight over and over again, or we're having the same discussion over and over again. Okay, we're in a pattern here. We need help.
If there are fights that you can see, or, conflict that you see other relationships resolving no problem, but you just have them all the time and can't get past it.
Yeah.
That's a sign.
That's a sign.
Incredible.
Wow. Those are all really eye-opening and helpful tips and things to look for.
Yeah. It's real. It's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, Danielle. I just want to thank you. I just want to I need something stronger than thank you. I want in this moment, because this is incredible. And I'm so honored that you came to this podcast and shared this with us, because I think our listeners, and definitely the two hosts, are going to take a lot from it. I think Victoria and I are going to end up having a debrief after.
I love it. And I love the way that your podcast is structured. I love it so much. I think it's so helpful. I mean, it's so real. It brings to light things that, that people may never have talked about before, right? And voiced in themselves. And you're encouraging that, because it took a lot for me. I looked back. I spent a lot of time going, what are my regrets with this? And it's pretty cathartic.
Oh,
actually.
Good.
Yeah. To be like, oh gosh, I did get through that. That was a regret, but we made it through.
Yeah.
We made it through it, despite that being something I wish I had done differently.
Definitely some of the best feedback we could receive. And that's why Shadow and I made the podcast, is we wanted to demonstrate that you can have a letting go just by having a conversation. Like, we can get our brain to think about letting go and releasing, that feeling cathartic, but having it in the right way. And we wanted, with this podcast, we want to give people the tools and the structure to have those conversations with their friends or family members. How are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? Do you have a cause for applause? Let's just start with something a little positive. Let's acknowledge how we're feeling. And then the really like acknowledging the like, did you just want to be heard or do you want to talk about it? And that's like a really key thing in relationships. And I say friendships too, because there's a lot of unsolicited advice that goes around and a lot of judgment, right?
Yeah.
So whether you're the person talking or venting, you can also say, I just want to be heard before you even have the conversation. You can also say what you want, but if you're the person listening and the person hasn't told you what they want to get out of it, then you can also ask, like, do you want feedback? I mean, maybe you say, do you want advice, or would you like my opinion? Maybe it doesn't sound like you want feedback because that might sound too clinical to you, but we just really want to model how we can really support each other without judgment, and how we can like have these conversations and how healing they can be when you have the right tools to be able to do it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that if you want somebody to be able to share vulnerable things with you, this is very similar to the way I structure conversations with my clients.
Oh, really?
Yes. You start with something positive or something, like, how are you feeling? Are you okay with having this conversation today? And then, I always have them start out with something that went well, or some sort of thank you for. So all the things you're using are real techniques everybody can use today if they're trying to have a conversation with somebody that's vulnerable. Great job.
That's a huge compliment
Great
coming
job.
from you. So thank you. Thank you so much. And we're so proud of the work we do on the Let's Relieve Regret podcast. And we're so thankful and grateful for anyone that comes on to be a guest, because we recognize that we're asking you to be vulnerable and you're being brave enough to be vulnerable and put it out there to the world. And that can be really scary. And it can also be really healing in the end. And so, and to also know, bringing it back to being of service, even though I just harped on being of service too much, but like it's being a service, right? Like everybody out there that's listening to this right now that made it all the way to the end of the podcast got something out of it.
Yeah, for
sure.
So
we appreciate you so much for, sharing your story, because the more people we can get to hear these stories and unique situations, or situations that everybody shares, or whatever it is, can have these aha moments and the breakthrough moments, and everybody can start healing. So our podcast wouldn't be able to have the impact it does if we didn't have guests that were brave enough to come on and tell their stories. So thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah. Okay, Danielle, before we wrap up, I want to give you 2 things to do.
Absolutely.
First thing is let our listeners know where they can find out more about you. And secondly, you get the last word. Anything else that you feel like you haven't covered yet, or that maybe you want to clarify before we jump off? The floor is yours.
Excellent. I can be found on my website, so daniellesebastian.com. Super simple. That is where you are going to find all my resources. So if what I was talking about today really resonates with you and you're thinking, you're in that situation, or you're thinking of a friend or a family member that you're like, I think that might be valuable for them to think about, I would send them to my website. There's free resources on there, and I offer anyone a free coaching call if they think this is something that they want to start seeing, if there's some different patterns that they can start creating in their relationship. So that's the best place. I'm also on Instagram, so Danielle Sebastian _wife care.
Nice. Nice. And is there anything we didn't cover today that you were hoping to clarify, or add any additional information about?
No, the only thing I would add is just I want everybody, and I think this was a really good discussion, to end with the quote that what often got us here doesn't always get us there.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
That's beautiful.
I think that's the title of this episode.
Don't you feel like that's what we touched on? Every one of our stories today is that, just because it's always worked, or it did work, doesn't mean that it can't change, and that it will continue to work for you, and moving on. So
yeah, love that. Okay.
Shadow's writing it down right now, right?
Write it down.
Okay, good.
That was a good one.
Yeah, it's a really good one. So Danielle, we would like to invite you to the final step of our podcast, which is Victoria will lead us through a breathing exercise.
Yes.
Okay. Victoria.
All right, everybody, please come to the front edge of your chair and put your feet flat on the floor if it is safe for you to do so. If you are driving, please continue to drive. And just place your hand on your heart and feel your feet on the ground, or maybe it's your bum on the chair. And just feel gravity pulling you into the earth. Just acknowledge that gravity will never let you float away. And because of that, you are supposed to be here on the face of the earth. You are worthy just because you are a human being that exists on the face of the earth. And we're going to take 3 letting go breaths, or self-awareness breaths. So on this first breath, take a big inhale in. And as you exhale out, say to yourself, I am choosing to believe that I am worthy just because I am. Just because I exist. And on this next breath, take in a big inhale and a long exhale. I'm committing to be kind in the way that I talk to myself each and every day. And on this last breath, take a big inhale in and a long exhale out. I am choosing to find small moments of joy and connection in my everyday ordinary so that I can heal and feel connected to the world around me. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We hope that you had some healing during this session, and we appreciate your support so much. Thank you so much to our guest, and we will see you, hear you, be with you, connect with you in the next one, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. This episode of Let's Relieve Regret was produced by Shadow Ball and Victoria Muir-Bercia.
Editing by me, Victoria Muir-Bercia.
We are an independent podcast supported by you, our listeners.
If you think this podcast sends a valuable message, you had an aha moment, or learned something new about yourself, help us realize our goal of reaching as many listeners as possible.
We encourage you to take action and support us right now by choosing one of the following options.
You can easily support us by
following us on Instagram at relieve.regret.
Tell 2 friends.
Leave a 5-star review on whatever app you're listening to us on.
Leave a tip at coffee.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast. That's ko-fi.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast.
Join our conversations in the Facebook group, Let's Relieve Regret Podcast.
Find all this information, all the links, and more in the podcast notes. Okay, bye.
Bye.